Last week we talked a lot about the resurgence that we're hearing regarding coronavirus. And we see now in the news, of course, that California is reclosing their businesses and their churches and everything else. A lot of people look into Florida now as a new so-called hotspot. New York cracking down on visitors from more states now, even coming to the state. Of course, here in Michigan, our governor now slapping us with $500 fines if we're busted not wearing a mask out in public. And there's a lot of these issues now that we're going to talk about, but one of the big ones we want to kick off the discussion with is what to do with the schools. Are the schools going to reopen or not? You're getting a lot of school districts around the country that are saying, no, we're not going to open up the schools this fall. I don't mind telling you, I disagree with this. I think the schools need to be open. And I do believe that there is a political aspect to keeping the schools closed. And I think it's a shame that our children are being used as pawns and families are being used in pawns for political purposes from the left. Now, I know that sounds kind of cynical on some people's part, but it doesn't seem to me that the right thing to do is to be closing the schools right now. But let's go around the table here and see what you guys think. First of all, and let's start with California, the People's Republic out there. Roger Marsh, what's going on with the schools? Are there going to be schools in California, or is it just going to be here and there in school districts of California? What do we know so far about what they're doing there?
Well, we have two very interesting debates going on. One for people who are saying we're going to shut the whole thing down. The second one is from school districts who are saying we're not. And actually, it's kind of ironic because it's right in the heart of KBRT land, which is the flagship for the Bottom Line show. Mm-hmm. Los Angeles Unified School District is the second largest school district in America. And they announced last week that they were not going to start having classes until the spring. They were going to basically take the whole fall off. It was all going to be online, all distance learning, et cetera, et cetera. Shortly after they made their announcement, San Diego Unified School District, which is a good-sized school district, not quite as big, made a similar announcement. Almost immediately the following day, the Orange County Board of Education met, and they passed a resolution. It's not binding law. It's not telling teachers and schools what they have to do. But they voted almost unanimously to not only open up schools in the fall, but to say do so not wearing masks and no requirement for social distancing. So, of course, now they're in the ire of everyone else. It's so fascinating if you try to do this based on the quote-unquote science involved, and you look at the whether or not children are at risk at school. Bob, your point is very well taken. Children are very, very risk averse. I mean, they're not going to be impacted by this nearly the way people in nursing homes are or in California prisons. There's a lot of perception. The problem in California, and I know what it's like in your guys' states too, is that the teachers' unions are looking at this and saying, oh, we can only have 15 kids per classroom. We'll need more teachers. Oh, we need to have distance spacing, and we'll probably need more schools being built too. They're probably hoping that COVID-19 goes on for a decade without any sort of cure because it means more money for them. The funding, though, comes from the federal government, and it's fixed. They can't do anything about the funding. So the idea that they would have split schedules and more teachers and smaller class sizes does not change the fact that they have the same pie to work with. And quite frankly, in California, I think what they're doing right now is trying to hold the kids hostage so they can get more money out of the federal government for schools.
John, what's your take there, and certainly the feel in Colorado?
Well, I think, first of all, I think everything Roger just said a moment ago about the teachers' unions is pretty much spot on. Yeah, these guys are hoping this thing will last forever because to them that means more federal dollars, more local dollars, more control basically is what it boils down to. Although what's happening in Colorado, which is very interesting, guys, is we're having now almost a restructure of even certain health departments and the way they're put together. For example, we've got a county here in Colorado, Douglas County, where they've been a part of a tri-county health organization, if you would, so 3 different counties as a part of it. Well, the tri-county, rules and regulations and what they want to pass down and so on doesn't necessarily fit Douglas County, who has, by the way, very, very few cases of COVID and very few deaths, and they want to do things kind of their own way. They don't want to be lumped into what everybody else is doing, in other cities across the Front Range here in Colorado, in the Denver area. So they're now exiting. They're calling it, the Dexit or the Douglas exit, basically. And so there's a restructuring going on. And by the way, that's affecting schools and school reopening and all sorts of things, because it's really in our area. I don't know what it's like across the rest of the country, Bob and Neil, I don't know what it's like for you guys, but here, the health departments are weighing in very heavily on even this school reopening. And we've got all these school districts basically saying, we're paying attention to the science, not the politics of things. Well, just the opposite is actually true. This is becoming very political and has nothing to do with the science.
Yeah. Neil, what's your take there from the New York perspective?
Well, Governor Cuomo put out some information this past week basically saying we'll decide later. No official announcement except to say that apparently the guideline in New York is going to be that if the daily infection rate remains below 5% using a 14-day average, then schools can be open, but they will close again if in any particular region the infection rate rises over 9% after August 1st. So they're watching the numbers now, and he's taken the approach, as he often has, that, we simply react based on data. But that calls into question how accurate is the data. I mean, we have a family friend that works in the healthcare industry, and they were told that they needed to be tested for coronavirus every other day for 14 days because of the fact that they had been in close proximity to somebody who had coronavirus. So then the question was raised, well, if they test positive a number of times during that time, does that count as 3 or 4 infections, or is that just 1 infection? So I don't know. I mean, I'm not completely disregarding the data that's available, but Cuomo's kind of taken that approach. I personally, just on the issue of should they reopen or not, I absolutely believe they should. Obviously, the concern is not so much for the kids because, Roger, I agree with what you said. I mean, kids are kind of risk averse, and I think that the one thing we know about this virus is that it hasn't been a huge problem for kids, especially anybody under 20. But the teachers, you can maybe keep students home if you think they've got a bit of a temperature, but the teacher has to be in school. And what if they test positive? So how do you keep the teacher safe? And I think that's a legitimate concern, but for every other reason, I think schools need to be open. I think this is going to seriously impact families, even businesses, definitely the children themselves. I think they need to be around teachers. I think they need to have face-to-face interaction with educators and other students. And there's competition involved in that. There's challenges. There's socialization. There's a lot of stuff that's a benefit. And so there's a cost to stay closed and there's a cost to reopen. And I just, my prayer is that we'll evaluate those two and decide to reopen schools in September.
Yeah, it's my prayer too. Bottom line, I think we're in agreement.
By the way, guys, I have a different take on that. So when you come back to that, Bob, let me know because I've got a different take on what Neil just said.
Okay, you know what? I'd love to hear it. And let's take a short break right now, and we'll continue this discussion. As we continue this National Crawford Roundtable podcast with myself, Bob Duco out of Detroit, Neil Boron Live out of Buffalo, New York, Roger Marsh, The Bottom Line out of Southern California, John Rush to Reason out of Denver, Colorado, talking about the latest resurgence of coronavirus, kind of a follow-up here, and right now talking about the schools and whether they should reopen. And John, you had a response to what Neil was saying.
Yeah, and mine is, and I appreciate everything Neil said, but I'm one that feels that, and I don't know why the teachers' unions and even the politicians are not looking at it this way, because frankly, the more we have kids at home learning, if you would, on their own, and I know it's not really on their own, I know it's online and there's some help and so on, but there's not that interaction you guys were just talking about with the teacher, which frankly, in my opinion, I think is good. If kids have the ability to now critically think more than they normally would, have to learn some things on their own, in a way sort of self-teach themselves, no offense, guys, they will become a lot better adults on down the road when they've got the ability to actually factor and figure things, which, by the way, is the problem we've got in this country right now, is nobody can do that anymore. They're being fed all these different things, and they believe whatever's in front of them without actually going out and looking at the factual data and trying to figure out things for themselves. My feeling is if we had kids at home more, and have them actually on their own, learning on their own, we might actually have a better country on down the road. So frankly, guys, I'm one that says, and I know it affects parents greatly, so I want to be careful in how I say this, but frankly, I don't care if they ever go back to brick and mortar schools.
You know, it's interesting you say that, John, because while I support the schools reopening, not for the same reason, though, that most other people support them reopening, because I get what you're saying philosophically. Look, my wife and I, we homeschool our kids. We've had 7 kids. Every single one of them have been homeschooled. Not one of them have ever spent a single day in public schools. And so I agree with everything that you're saying here. Critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills. When kids are homeschooled, a lot of people don't realize they actually end up doing a lot more of the work themselves.
That's right.
People think it's the parent standing there at a chalkboard in the home.
No, it's
actually,
opposite.
It really is exactly. So I totally get what you're saying. And so if the schools didn't open and the parents were forced to homeschool their kids would actually be better served. The truth would be. My reason, though, John, for wanting to open the schools is that I know that there's a lot of parents out there. They're not going to do this. A lot of the kids are going to slip through the cracks. And so since that's going to happen, I hate the idea of caving in to the left-wing mob and to the powerful teachers' unions that are demanding that the schools stay closed and such. I hate feeding the fear factor with the schools being closed down, because it causes this atmosphere of, oh my goodness, we're in the depth of the bubonic plague, we're all going to die soon. And I just hate feeding that philosophy. So that's my reason for saying reopen the schools, but not because I think the kids are better served.